It goes from 4 Hz to 5.5, then 6, then 4, so it kind of accelerates and decreases. And that's an amplitude factor that is applied to the original curve. Oops. Maybe I should not. This. Okay, so that's useful. Then you can tune it a little bit more. You can also use some jitter effect that allow you to make this kind of vibrato but less regular, to make it more realistic too. Oops. You can also generate some sound that does not look like voice. If you make some, here we use at the origin some voice parameter and we transform them so that they don't look at voice anymore. I show it because you will see in the opera this process is also frequent. So in this kind of tone we feel like there is some voice somewhere, but it's not anymore some realistic voice sound. This is another example. And in the opera itself, we used a lot of this kind of processes that started with standard simple voice sound as the one I made at the beginning and transformed them. For instance, this is a voice generating patch. So you see the parameters are a little bit more complex and subtle. The vibrato has this profile, so it's accelerating and slowing down as I did before, but in addition there is a jitter here that changes the amplitude of the vibrato across the duration of the process. And this same patch, as you see here, the green arrows are inputs of this patch, is used again and again with different parameters to generate a lot of such short voice sound. I have a number of them here. So in this patch I use the other one. I open it, it's called One Voice, and this one is Voices. And these are the set of parameters I use iteratively on this patch to generate a whole list of different sounds. So I will run this big patch here, and it should generate 1 to 9 different sounds with the same original patch and different parameters. Okay, so let's hear them. This is the first set of parameters. sounds are getting more and more electronic like. And even at the end, when the pitch is getting very low, and the bandwidth also are supposed to be narrow enough to make the sound a little bit like little bells. Sounds is the same process with different set of parameters. So there is a passage in the opera where they appear, almost exactly the same as these ones. So I can tell you a bit more. So the idea is the main character of the opera is the king, is the one who was walking alone at the end. And the synthetic voice corresponds to the conscience of the king. So he's a bad king, he's very bad with people, he's hurting a lot and killing a lot of his people, so he has bad conscience. And the voices he hears is his conscience that tells him he's going to die and he's done very bad things in his life. And this passage is the first time when he first hears the voice. So you will see he's around and then the synthetic voice appear and everyone is listening to them. So after this idea of generating some short extract of voices, comes the problem of how you articulate and organize such different sounds into more larger scale phrases, because one of the interests when you do some voice synthesis or similar synthesis processes is how you organize longer phrase with articulation and transitions. So the structure we use for it, that we have seen in the previous batches, and we usually use them also for other kind of synthesis process, look like this one on the right is a kind of a matrix that represents the values of a number of parameters for a number of synthesis components. Previously with the additive synthesis, the components were the oscillators. In this case, it's the different force generators for the different formants in the sound. So in the different patches of the OM Chant library, we have these different kinds of events that represent the FOF. That's the one we use. The fundamental frequency, we also use them. And there exists some other that do some filtering, noise generating, or additional sound file input. And every of these objects can be used just as a synthesis controller as I did before, but also as a kind of independent object that can be articulated with other objects, which means it has time position in a supposed overall time referential and also a given duration that allow you, for instance, to use different objects together in these examples, or to set them in the time referential of a maquette. If you remember Gérard's presentation yesterday, it's kind of an interface where you can put objects in time in order to make some temporal structures. show you another example. So we have used these events already when I in the different processes I've shown, but in this example here, all this folder here is the tutorial examples that are provided with the library. So if you want to play with them, you see there are a lot of them. In this one, we have resynthesized the Queen of the Night from Mozart. So it was a historical example that Xavier Audet and his team did back in the 80s, but they programmed it directly with the environment at that time. And here we reproduce the same example starting from the MIDI. Okay, that's the MIDI song. And we process this in a loop, in an iteration, and with each of these notes, we generate two different events, like this would correspond to one of the different voices of my previous example. So here we do this iteratively, and we make a fundamental frequency event and a fourth bank of generators event. And we collect everything. If I evaluate this loop here, you see the result. I get a big list with lots of events, and I just give this big list of events to my synthesis function here. Okay, we play it with the piano accompaniment. Okay, so no piano. Okay, sorry, I'll fix it after and make you hear with the accompaniment. So you got the idea is you take every single note here, and you make a set of synthesis events for the sound synthesis. In the rehearsal opera, also some such sequences are used. There is one funny example at the very beginning of the opera, where some cell phone sounds are generated. Okay, so this is an imitation of a cell phone, but it's done like exactly as if we did with specific frequencies and values for the format. And then this same process is iterated, and values are changed to this synthetic setup to get more and more close to the parameters of voice sound. Okay. And we can also morph progressively from one to the other. Okay. Here we just make kind of a similar loop, but at the beginning we keep the strict values, and at the end we increase the vibrato, etc. Or we can even make sound. Okay, with the sound. So the extract in the So here again you will hear the same passage. It's the very beginning when so someone says, please shut down your cell phone, and then it starts, and that's the beginning of the report. Okay, so these are the sounds already from the
Mesdames, Messieurs, nous vous prions d'éteindre vos téléphones portables. Nous vous rappelons que les photos avec ou sans flash et les enregistrements sonores vidéo sont interdits. Mesdames et messieurs, nous vous prions d'éteindre complètement vos téléphones portables. Ministre, c'est bon ensemble. Bourgeois, c'est bourgeois. Si au fond de vos lits les cauchemars pour moi, si on songe nous assale avec la supervision de squelettes et des ombres, de spectres et démons, de rapider ces arbres des jambes, et ces gorges obscures.
Okay, so far we've been through the generating a single sound, then we generate sequences of sounds, but we didn't address the issue of how if you have several sounds overlapping or at the same time. And this is very important, especially if you, well, when you have a temporal structure like I've shown here, for instance. Okay, you don't want to be constrained with having things in sequence, and you want to organize things like this with parallel construction or overlapping construction. The problem is, as I explained how the system works before, that you imagine you have these events that would be the objects we have in OpenMusic, this kind of matrices with the beginning time and ending time. And these are the control values we give to the synthesizer. So in the example I've shown, so far we are in this case here where we set two values that makes a steady sound. Between the two, the synthesizer makes an interpolation and then it plays the next note, okay, in the melodies or whatever. If we have some continuous control for the vibrato or whatever, it's also working because we have a continuous control here, then an interpolation, and then another continuous control. There is a trick we use to make, like in the Queen of the Night example, is when we have a gap here and we don't want to hear the interpolation, we shut down the amplitudes, we make this kind of fade in, fade out on the amplitude values. So instead of giving two values here, we would give four. One with amplitude 0, one is amplitude, amplitude, amplitude 0, and that makes a kind of staccato sounds. The problem is if we are in this configuration with overlapping, here we have a kind of a strange transition. We go from the first values to the second one, then back to the first, then back to the second one. So that's can be interesting, but not necessarily what we want. And if we are in this case and we overlap the two, then we get a kind of a mess of parameters in the overlapping area. So this, okay, that's for instance an example. If I have this core and I do kind of the similar process as before, if I look what is the resulting curve from, this is supposed to be the fundamental frequency of each note with the vibrato. If I look the resulting control curve for the process, I have these areas here where all the parameters are messed together. That's a zoom on this one. If I that's what I did. Because when I do this, also this is quite similar to the Queen of the Night example. Okay, that's a random melody. Here I generate all the control events, as before, and I can synthesize, or I can just write the SDIF control file just to check what are the parameters. Okay, so that's my, oops, that's the previous result. Okay, that's my fundamental frequency curve, and that's the, if we here. Okay, the overlapping intervals are, there is all contradictory values for the fundamental frequency. In this example here, we have a process here, I will explain what it does right after, that allows us to take every 2 successive events and make some transformation on it. So in this case, I modify the amplitude so that to create this fade in, fade out on each period, and I can get. Oops. Okay, here I didn't solve the problem, but just I shut down the synthesizer when it's problematic. So if when we published this paper at a farm workshop at the ICFP conference last year, and we did not agree with the reviewers of the paper because they say, oh, but your problem is very simple, it's just over-specification of your function or something like this, and and especially Marco, he said, no, that's not a problem I want to solve, that's an opportunity I want to grasp to control the transition, what's going on in between 2 events in my synthesis process. So that's why we developed this process I just did with the fade in, fade out, and say, okay, we will say that we consider this function, this sequence of events, and a function, another function that I say a function, it's a program in OpenMusic that we will devise and determine in order to deal with the problem of 2 events overlapping. And then we find a solution to apply it to the whole sequence. So one possibility, for instance, is you have 2 different events like this, and then you say, okay, I remove the part in between in order to get this. So it can be done just by interverting the ending and beginning date of the first and the second events. It's quite easy to program. A second solution is to say, okay, I do the same, but in between I want to add some information. For instance, I don't want a silence, or I don't want a simple interpolation. I want to control the vibrato or the other parameters in the transition. So I have 2 events at the beginning, and my result is 2 other events plus an intermediate event. That's another strategy. And another strategy could be to take 2 events and to generate one, which is a kind of a merge of the 2 first events. That can be done also in OpenMusic with functions that we have for cross-fading curves or other process that can be programmed. So formally, we start from, we have this function that from 2 events generates a number of other events, 2 or 3 or 1 or 5 or whatever. And if you apply to a sequence, we take a sequence of event and this function, and we generate a new sequence of event by applying it iteratively on 2 successive events. Okay, so that's how it works. Supposing we use this first strategy, we have these 4 events, and we take the first 2, we generate 2, we take the last one of these plus the next one here, we generate 2 more, we take the last one of this plus the next one here, and we generate 2 more, and at the end we have the 4 events with no overlapping. So this is how it looks. Oops. Yeah, the sound only. Okay, so that's the result of this process. What happened here, it's not very nice because as we have shrinked the values of the things, we changed the frequency of the vibrato. And so we hear that the vibrato is not very nice. So in the second case, if we take 2 and we generate an intermediate event, that makes this. I take the first 2, I generate 3, I take the last one here, and the next one, I generate 3 more. I take the last one and the next one, and I generate 3 more, and at the end I get this kind of sequence here. So the result looks like this. Here, okay, if I suppose the process is this one, we say I start from one value and finish another one, and I generate a kind of vibrato. I can produce some more better looking curve, but you see there are a lot of discontinuities because I do not control the point where the event, I don't finish and the next one starts. However, this case was interesting. We had an internship with Raphaël Foulon last year, an ATIAM student. And he focused his work on this intermediate event, saying, okay, what can we do to make some better processing for generating this event? And in particular, he was interested in saying, what if we use this intermediate event to simulate the consonants like M, L, N, etc. So he made some analysis of sounds, observed how was the spectrum behaving, and produced develop this kind of structure. They also look like control matrices, but they determine the shape of the transition for each different parameter of the force generator, amplitude, frequency, amplitude, etc. And for the 5, if there is 5 different formats that we are using. So this, for instance, is the profile of a B. The frequencies are like this. We suppose this is the ending value of the previous note, and this is the next value, the beginning value of the next note, etc. So that's the profile for B, that's the profile for M. You can look at the sound. So it's not very, very realistic, but we recognize the... And that's with the B profile and the M profile. Okay, so the results are not yet very realistic, but it's interesting to... That corresponds to this idea of grasping the moment where there is this transition and trying to control it. Probably by doing some more precise work on these parameters, we could get some better results. And finally, this last possibility is the one that gives the better result, even if it's much more costly in computation, because we must imagine there are lots of such events and lots of data in each event, and we get some growing data structures. So with the first 2, we make a bigger one, and with this big one and the next one, we make a bigger one, and we make a bigger one, and at the end we finish with one very big control event that merges all the other events. So we program this with the crossfade functions, and we get this kind of fundamental frequency profile. And here I just show the fundamental frequency, but you must imagine we do the same with the other parameters of synthesis. And the result is... Okay, so this one was by far the better sounding result. I finish with this last example, and I give you the end of the story. So this is the king, and he's dying 2 at the end. And the process of is dying uses this idea of a big sequence of events, not to generate a phrase like this, but it's because the composer Marco wanted to generate a very big sound. It lasts several minutes, and this sound is actually a process that goes through several stages that are recognized, that he recognized in the process. So for this, he used different kind of structure within. For instance, this is our somehow pitch versus time representation of the sound analysis model, but in this case, it's not extracted from analysis; it's generated from scratch. The idea is to make a sound that starts from the voice of the character on stage, of the singer. So these are the values of the first 4 months of his voice. Should be 5. I don't know what. And progressively in the process, these 5 formants will converge to a more complex spectra, which correspond to the spectrum of the bell from the beginning, the additive synthesis process. And so here we have just 5. Here we have several hundreds. So each formant is actually a cluster of formant that spread more and more while the process is progressing. So we have this spreading of the frequencies. At the same time, there is a curve of fundamental frequency that decreases. So the voice starts like, and then and at the end it's so loud that it becomes and at the same time the bandwidth of the formants is also decreasing, so we have some kind of additive synthesis that is simulated here at this point with the fourth generators. So we go from the sound, the synthesis of a voice with the fourth technique, and we arrive progressively to an additive synthesis that simulates the bell that we heard at the beginning. And all this is controlled by a number of stages that are defined with steps. You see, for instance, at the top it's the fundamental frequencies. We have the patch here. Here are the fundamental frequencies. Here are the different steps of the frequency, and this is the bandwidth. So it's a small number of different stages, and everything is controlled by this transition process that I described before. So it's a little bit messy, but that makes the work of crossfading the fundamental frequency in particular. And that synthesizes the sound. So I will finish by last video example of this scene of the opera.
Thank you. Hello? Hello?
Hello, hello. Thank you very much, Jean. It was very nice because you incredible examples. So I guess we have a lot of questions. So who's going to be the first one? And also we have questions from the internet. Tatiana, maybe you can come here and ask some of the questions. Okay?